Thank you so much. Right now we have a short little 5-minute segment when we are going to talk to you a little bit about the history of Syria. And I have with me Jordan Elmore Thompson. And by the way, this is the young man whose great-great-grandmother just passed away, Evelyn Bland. You folks know that, right? And and the family's here today, so we just want to extend our condolences to all of you for the loss of Evelyn. She was almost 102 years old and just lived a long, long life. And she was a vegetarian, right?
Full vegetarian.
Full vegetarian. And she loved her herbs. Instead of wanting to take medications, she would take herbs, and she knew all of the herbs in the books. And I tell you, there is something to this healthy lifestyle. I still love that chicken, I tell you, but when I hear these stories, you know what I mean? You start thinking. So I was privileged to know Evelyn. She had such a wonderful spirit, didn't she?
Yeah, definitely.
And she lived as an independent person all the way until the very end, and except for the last couple of weeks, and I gotta say, both Sandy and Joanne took good care that's something, when you have family, when you have kids who take care of their parents and grandparents. It doesn't happen very often, but in your family it did happen, and I think it deserves a mention, and it should give all of us something to think about. I tell you, older folks need to be visited, need to be remembered, needs to be in our minds. And a lot of people sometimes act that when a person gets old, they just ignore them anymore. And some of the saddest stories that I have heard of as a pastor is the neglect by children and grandchildren of the folks who have really helped them to grow up and raise them and put them on their 2 feet. So folks, if you have somebody in your family that is older and not capable anymore, then if you can't be there for them, to cook them meals, you can make a phone call and say, "Hi, Grandma," and talk to them a little bit. And I am glad that your family has taken good care of Evelyn. The memorial service is going to be right here in this church this coming Friday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And we do need your help, folks. The family is going to bring some food. And I would also like to invite those of you who have known Evelyn and who have that afternoon free to come out and help us, maybe bring some food, and also help us to set up the food out in the gym for the family to stay and visit with each other after the service here. So we need that help, and if you can help with it, please talk to me. Or, I would say talk to Debbie, but Debbie's in California right now. So you'll need to talk to me or Jim Becker, and so we can make those arrangements. Jordan, let's get to Syria. Tell me, I'm going to interview you, and you have I asked you to put together a little history on Syria, and I said to him, Jordan, I need this to be 5 minutes long, and he sent me a PowerPoint presentation that had 45 slides, and every one of them was like this, And by the time you divided these slides into what you can really see on the screen, there probably would have been 140, right?
Yeah, you kind of got me to talking, so gave me my soapbox, I guess you could say.
And you are a young man, but you enjoy studying about Syria, and I know that you have done quite a bit of research on it, and I think it's interesting for our church to know that there are young people out there who really care about the last day events. What got you into this particular study?
I mean, just hearing everything that's going on in the Middle East, and then, from bits and pieces what you learn in church and Sabbath school growing up, I just wanted to kind of find out on my own what's really going on, what, does the future look like?
Okay, so I ask you to do a little bit on the history of Syria, And obviously we had the map there, and then we have this slide here. I just wanted you to summarize each slide a little bit and just give us a little bit of a historical background on Syria. So you can go ahead and start on this particular slide and just tell us a few things that are important here.
I mean, essentially, Syria houses, obviously, the capital city of Damascus, which is actually one of, if not the oldest cities in the world. I mean, Damascus, Jerusalem, those are two of the most ancient cities. Essentially, Damascus, though, is a city-state. I mean, before there was even Assyria, Damascus itself was an independent country-like city throughout the world. No matter who occupied that territory, Damascus was always the center of that empire. As Damascus became an independent country, its army has become ambitious at times, and almost 30 years ago, it went into Lebanon to, vest Syria's interest at that point.
Now, one thing that is interesting, let me interrupt you, is that even today, most of the Syrian population lives in and around Damascus.
Yeah, about 80% of the population of Syria actually resides in Damascus. Obviously, there's other cities, but that's the center of Syria as a country.
And the reason for that is because most of the rest of the country is just a desert.
Exactly. It's basically just desert, wasteland. Damascus has just remained a vibrant city, kind of a beacon for that region.
Okay, next slide is about Syria's history before Christ. And let's just talk a little bit about that for a second.
I mean, Damascus goes way back into even the Old Testament, before there was Syria as we know it. I mean, the 10th and 8th centuries, obviously the Armenian kingdom, which was essentially a rival of Israel, ironically, at that time. What happened in 732 is the Assyrians came, conquered that region, and took Damascus over as part of their empire.
So they did belong to the kingdom of Assyria for a long time.
Correct. Not till 732.
Okay, tell us a little bit about David and his issues with Syria. That would be the next slide.
I mean, obviously, we know modern day Israel is an enemy of Syria, but this dates way back to even the time of King David. Essentially, through different treaties and obviously human beings wanting to have control, Damascus had at times wanted to take control of Israel. David, as you know, was a king called by God, and so not only did he protect Israel's interests, but he, essentially took land that had belonged to the ruling party at that time.
Okay, and then other kings after David, for example, on the slide it says history continued, Hazael was another king who took control of Damascus around 842 BC. What can you tell us a little bit about that in Palestine at that time?
I mean, as it says right there, Hazael, which is found in 2 Kings 8:7, took control. Despite invasions from multiple people, Hazael was able to hold off those invaders and maintain control of the city and most of southern Syria, as well as Palestine, or what is today known as the Gaza Strip area. At the end of the 9th century, though, Armenian power declined essentially, and they were conquered, and Jeroboam essentially made Damascus part of his kingdom.
And then on the next slide, in 720, Hamath, they rebelled against Assyria. How did that bode for them?
Essentially, an annexation occurred and they rebelled. The powerful King Sargon II conquered the rebellion. Rebellion's kind of a chronic thing in Syrian history. The people get fed up with whatever ruling party is governing them, whether it's of their own people or if it's a foreign ruler, and they decide to rebel.
And then we are seeing here that after that, you don't hear much about Damascus until the time after Jesus, during the time of Paul.
Exactly.
And why is the Damascus important at the time of Paul?
Well, after Jesus' death, the largest group of Christian followers actually resided in Damascus. Essentially, Jews who were in Jerusalem fled to Damascus because of the persecution after Christ's death.
So Damascus became a pretty strong Christian center.
Correct. It was basically a haven for Christians, which is why you'll find Paul in Acts 9 getting the letters from the Pharisees at that time to go to Damascus and bring those Jews back to Jerusalem to stand trial.
And we can also say that even to this day, there are Christians living in that area of the world.
Correct. There is actual communities that are just Christian communities. Obviously, Syria is a predominantly Muslim country of Shia origin. It's actually along what's called the Shiite Crescent. But there is a strong group within Damascus itself of Christians, still some ancient chapels back from...
On this one slide, it says here that there is a chapel called their Chapel of St. Paul. What do people believe about that place?
Well, they believe it's along the area where Ananias had originally taken Paul when he was blinded by Jesus. They also believe that that temple is where the wall was when Paul was actually lowered from the top of the wall down because the governor of Damascus at that time had wanted him executed.
Okay, so now to me, the idea that there is still buildings where Paul would have walked and been in is just amazing. But we don't think about it too much here in this country because this is a young country. But when you go to the old world, I mean, there are places, there are buildings that are thousands of years old. So I love walking into those places. Okay, let's conclude by talking a little bit about Anglo-French Pact of 1916. What can you tell us about that?
Essentially, what happened after World War I is basically the French and the British made a treaty because there was some disagreement over who was going to control Syria at that time. 1916 allowed the French essentially to control Syria and keep their interest within that region. Okay,
and today, what's going on right now? Civil war? How would you describe that civil war? Who is it between?
I mean, obviously you have the government, the presidency, which has its military, but it also has members of the organization known as Hezbollah, which is in southern Lebanon, Syria, and comes out of Iran. And then you have rebels who are obviously trying to overthrow the government. And some of that rebel segment actually is from the organization of Al-Qaeda.
So right now it would be safe to say that it's kind of hard to know who's who and really what's going on in that particular country.
Exactly. It's hard to say, us over here worrying about our safety, who is really in the best interest of us right now.
Jordan, thank you for this, for putting this together. I really appreciate it. And maybe we'll continue next week on a second part.
Definitely. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, buddy. At this point, we have a short 2.5-minute video clip. Is that happening, Kevin? Okay, and I just want to say...
Islamist terrorists set off...
Wait, I just want to say the opinions presented in this clip do not necessarily reflect the opinions of this pastor or of this church or of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Thank you.
Islamist terrorists set off car bombs in Jaramana, a predominantly Christian town near Damascus, in late July 2013. These terrorist bombers are the so-called Syrian rebels supported by President Barack Obama and Senator John McCain. Obama is supplying the rebels with arms and training to overthrow the secular government of Syrian President Bashar Assad. In Jaramana, the car bombs killed 10 civilians and injured 66 more, including children. Nearly 100,000 Iraqi Christian refugees who fled their homeland after the U.S.-led invasion overthrew the secular dictatorship there in 2003 live in and around Jaramana. The Al-Nusra Front, funded by the government of Qatar, and the Islamic State of Iraq also used car bombs in Christian areas of Damascus in July, killing many civilians, including children and injuring dozens. Barack Obama and John McCain, Islamist friends, don't care who they kill or maim in their war to overthrow the secular government of Syria. The same month, they beheaded a priest and still hold several Christian clergy captive, including 2 bishops. These bloodthirsty Islamist thugs are fighting jihad to obtain their 72 virgins in paradise by killing infidels. America should not send any support to these terrorist killers. Whatever weapons America provides will be used first against Christians in Syria, then against Jews in Israel, and eventually against America. The Syrian rebels are part of a global war against the West by Islamists. They seek the destruction of human rights and the establishment of Sharia law worldwide under a caliphate. Tragically, the Obama administration has allied itself with the enemies of freedom and of Western civilization. You must urgently contact your congressmen and senators, asking them to stop President Barack Obama and his Senate allies from arming the Islamists of Syria. I'm William J. Murray, Chairman, Religious Freedom Coalition, Washington, D.C.
Where everybody has their own opinion. And that's why I said the views that are expressed in that video clip do not reflect my views. But I sent you the other day an article, a couple of different articles, not necessarily because I stand behind them, but I think it is important for us to understand what's going on out there in the world. And when I listen to a guy like this, you can also find another video that is going to say a completely opposite thing on this issue. And you will find another video that will say that we need to go in there and we need to protect the poor people that the Assad regime is destroying and killing. And when you listen to these videos, you find out, you realize, I realize, at least in my own personal mind, I don't know what's going on here. I really don't know anymore what's going on here. I hear and see hundreds of different theories on this topic. Somebody sent me a whole article on the conspiracy, on a theory. Is it a conspiracy theory or is it true? I don't know. We are trying to figure out. But one of the theories is that Egypt, Libya, Iran, North Korea, Syria, they're not part of the world banking system and they need to be brought into that particular system. And as long as they resist, the United States is going to go after them. And we already overthrew Egyptian and Libyan governments, and now Iran and Syria and North Korea are next. How do you know what is true and what is not true? And when I look at all of this, to me there is one word that describes this whole situation, and that word is confusion. Confusion. Who do you believe? Do you believe President Obama? Do you believe John McCain? And by the way, they don't agree on everything. You know, they have different agendas too. Do you believe Democrats who are opposed to the war? Do you believe now you have both Democrats and Republicans getting together and opposing the war, and then you have another group that is in favor of the war? Who do you believe? Who is Assad? Do you even know who is Assad? I don't know who is this guy. I heard of his father and him being in power in that country for a long time. I don't know what they stand for. Who are the rebels? Are they Islamists? Are they going to kill all of the Christians? Are they the good guys? Or are they the bad guys? Are they Al-Qaeda? This guy that we just saw his video, he says these people are Al-Qaeda. Why are we supporting them? Are they somebody who wants democracy? Or are they somebody who wants a fundamentalist Islamist state? Where should we come down on this whole issue? What will these people do when they come into power and overthrow this particular president? And then another question is it possible that this whole thing will trigger World War III? I hear people telling me Pastor Gordon, this is the beginning of an end. We are going to have Armageddon. And when you look at the Seventh-day Adventist teachings, what it is that we hear a lot in Daniel and Revelation seminars and evangelistic meetings, we hear a lot about Gog and Magog, and we hear a lot about the whole world coming down to Jerusalem and all of these powers. United States, Russia, China, all getting into this major war. So the question that I have is this the beginning of an end? Is this the sign that Jesus is coming? Is this the sign that Jesus is coming? And there are people here in this church who believe absolutely that this, excuse me, that this is the moment. Because Bible talks about Damascus, and he talks about Jerusalem, and he talks about Armageddon. And it seems like right now, this particular time in our lives, everything is coming together for a major blow up. Now, I want to teach a couple of things today. Number one, everything is in God's hands. That's true or not true? That's true. Everything is in God's hands. I read out of Exodus chapter 9, verses 11 to 13. And this is the story of Pharaoh and Moses. And I just want you to understand where I'm coming from on this. The magicians who tried to repeat the miracles performed by Moses, those magicians could not stand before Moses because of the boils that were on them and on all of the Egyptians, because God basically put boils on all of the Egyptians. I believe I don't have to go into the whole story because most of you know this story, right? God put so the Lord, it says here, the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he would not listen to Moses and Aaron, just as the Lord had said to Moses. Then God said to Moses, "Go to Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart." Who is in charge of all of the human affairs? God says, "Go to him, for I have hardened his heart and the hearts of his officials, so that I may perform these signs of mine among them, that you may tell your children and grandchildren how I dealt harshly with the Egyptians and how I performed my signs among them, and that you may know that I am the Lord." So God is in charge. Sometimes, we get too fast to blame government officials. So we blame President Obama. He's the president right now, and I put his picture on the screen there. And a lot of people are saying President Obama is taking this country down the wrong road, and he's the guy that is going to lead us into the war, and we need to rise up against it and fight against this whole situation. Let me tell you something. He may be the president, but who is in charge? Pharaoh, when he thought that he was in charge, he wasn't. God was the one that decided how he was going to act. So you can have President Obama doing whatever he's doing and planning and making plans, and trying to think this thing through. You have Vladimir Putin there, and he's also another guy who is a major world leader, major power in his hands. I mean, these two guys, they got more nuclear weapons they control than anybody else. You would think that they could do just about anything they wanted to do, right? Who is in control? And people go out there and they say bad things about Obama, they say bad things about Putin, they say bad things about John McCain. And John McCain I mentioned because he's somebody that has really been pushing for this war, and he's a powerful senator, and he's somebody that has a lot of clout, almost became the president of the United States. But who is in charge? And you have Assad. Assad is the president of this country. His father was the president of that country before him. They have held power for a long, long time. And these guys, they may think that they are in charge. But God is in charge. Amen. You and I, we may think that we are in charge of our lives sometimes. I may think that Pastor Gordon is in charge of this church. But who is in charge? You may think you're in charge of your job, of your life. You may think you're in charge of what you're going to do this week, but you're not. God is in charge. God is in charge of everything that happens on this planet. Daniel 4:34 says, King Nebuchadnezzar was one of the most powerful kings at that time. He was just as powerful then as President Putin and President Obama are powerful nowadays. That's how powerful this man was. I mean, he invaded countries and nations and subjugated peoples. Everybody was scared of him. And you remember what happened to him? He lost his mind because he rebelled against God. And verse 34 says, at the end of that time, I, Nebuchadnezzar, raised my eyes toward heaven, and my sanity was restored. Then I praised the Most High. I honored and glorified Him who lives forever. His dominion is an eternal dominion. His kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the peoples of the earth are regarded as nothing. He does as He pleases with the powers of heaven and the peoples of the earth. No one can hold back His hand or say to Him, what have you done? Who is in charge? Who is in charge? God is in charge. I say it's not too smart to get so personally involved in this emotionally that we become hateful. Because God is in charge. God is going to do what He wants to do. If God wants this to be the beginning of an end, then this is going to be the beginning of an end. Does it have to be a beginning of an end? It doesn't. This could go on for another 5 years or 50 years. We don't know. Let's just assume for a moment here, for the sake of the argument, I'm not saying that this is going to happen, but let's just assume that the United States sends the ships, and I put the picture up there, sends the ships, and they attack Syria. Let's assume that that happens here in the next 3 or 4 weeks. We send the ships, we bomb Syria, and then what happens next? Let's say that the video that you heard before me, that guy is correct. And let's say that Syria retaliates, and who do they hit? They can't hit New York. They're too far away. The only place that they can hit is Israel. They can hit Tel Aviv, maybe Jerusalem, maybe other parts of that country. What happens if they retaliate against the American attack? Next thing you know, the United States has to retaliate against them. And then all of a sudden you have our president telling us, you know what? We tried to calm them down. They wouldn't listen. So now we got the escalation in our hands, and we got to go in a little bit heavier, and we got to get this situation under control. And then before you know it, it's possible that Iran joins in, right? It's a powerful country, that it's an ally of Syria. And then once Iran joins in, then all of a sudden you have United States bombing Iran, and Israel is getting involved, and Russia and China are sitting there on the sidelines. I don't think that we are going to go to war with Russia and China, personally. But what if Russia and China say to us, hey, by the way, guys, since you don't want to cooperate with us, we want our money back. Do you realize how much money we owe to China? Do you realize how much money we owe to Russia? Do you know who BRICS nations are? Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, the most populous nations on the earth. What happens if Al-Qaeda overthrows Saudi government? And what happens if these big countries come to us and say, we want our money back? Foreign governments hold about 46% of all U.S. debt held by public. More than $4.5 trillion. The largest foreign holder of United States debt is China, which owns more than $1.2 trillion in bills, notes, and bonds, according to the Treasury. What if they decided they want their money back? BRICS nations the nations that I just mentioned, they got together back in April and they decided to create their own, to forge their own new World Bank and to use their own currency. Do you realize that right now, all over the world, if any country wants to buy oil, they have to buy it in dollars? Did you know that? If you are Germany and you want to buy oil from Saudi Arabia, you can buy it, but you have to pay in dollars, in American dollars, which means you have to buy the dollars first, and then you can buy the oil. What happens if these countries say to us, you know what, we want our money back and we don't want to use your dollar anymore? The governments, now this is right out of the article, the governments and dictatorships ruling over the so-called BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, agreed to set up a new World Bank that analysts say could further marginalize the increasingly unstable United States dollar, possibly helping to eventually dethrone it as the global reserve currency. In other words, what that means is that money that we have in our pockets is not going to be worth anything. That's what that means. Now, it is impossible for us here in America to understand that concept. That you could have a wallet. Let me see how much money I have. I have 3 5s. $15. It is impossible for me to imagine that I could have this and it's not worth anything. What if you had $1,500 in your pocket and you walked outside and you wanted to buy a loaf of bread and it would cost $2,000? This has happened in Argentina. It has happened in former Yugoslavia. It has happened in Germany after World War II. It has happened in many countries where the inflation just surged like crazy, and all of a sudden, everything that you had, all of your possessions, were worth nothing. It has happened in many countries where you had $100,000 of savings in your bank, and next morning you went there and tried to get your money out, and they said you couldn't have it. It was all gone. Now, this is a scenario that I think is possible, because I don't think that China and Russia and the United States want to lob nuclear bombs at each other, but they can play these kinds of games. And they can say, we want our money back and we don't want to use your money anymore. What happens if the United States is pushed into a corner? The Bible talks about it, right? Seventh-day Adventists study about this all the time. What happens if the United States is pushed into the corner? You know, the only thing that's left on the table at that point is the use of the nuclear power. And we have plenty of that, don't we? And what happened? What happens if all of a sudden the whole situation escalates to the point where the United States has to say, you know what? At this point, our existence is threatened so much that we are ready to use a nuclear bomb. And I put the picture there. I think it's a drawing of a nuclear bomb going off over a city. What happens at that point? Now, you know, I believe personally, this is my personal belief, I believe that the world is going to come to this point. I just don't know that it's going to come to this point now as a result of what's going on in the world at this moment. And the reason I say that is because the Bible clearly tells us that nobody knows the time or the day or the hour, right? Nobody knows when Jesus is going to come. So I couldn't tell you, I would never tell you, you know what, I think this is the beginning of an end, and I think this is it. Now we are, I don't know that. Nobody knows that. But it's possible that this type of a scenario is going to play out. Look at this next slide. Pope Francis, when all of this happened, he held a 5-hour prayer vigil for the peace in Syria. What happens if the world comes to a brink of World War III, Armageddon, and you have the church, the most powerful church in the world, already positioning itself as the peacemaker? Is that a possibility? I bet you that that's a strong possibility where the church is going to come up and say, you know what? We all need to step back, look at this whole situation. Let's pray. Let's get back to God. Let's get back to religion. Let's get back to church. And then what happens? If you're a Seventh-day Adventist, if you're a Reformed Seventh-day Adventist, if you're a Seventh-day Baptist, if you're somebody who disagrees with the official teachings of that particular church, what happens to you? For the sake of peace, for the sake of country, for the sake of survival, you're asked to join all the other Christians in the way that they worship God. Are you going to be prepared for that? 1 Thessalonians 5, 1-7 says, "But of the times and the seasons, brethren, you have no need that I write unto you, for yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night. For when they shall say, peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them." I'm reading of King James. "As travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape." My father always used to read this text to me. He would always say to me, "Gordon, when the world leaders tell us that we have peace and prosperity, that there is nothing more to fear, that all of the problems and fights and arguments have been ironed out, that's the time when the whole world explodes. And that's the time that marks the beginning of the end." And I always remember that from my dad. Nobody knows the time, nobody knows the day. But for when they shall say, peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them, as travail upon a woman. All of a sudden, without any warning. "But you, brethren, are not in darkness, that day should overtake you as a thief." That day is going to overtake this world as a thief. This world is not going to know what hit them. But look what the Bible says. You don't need to be in the darkness. And you should not be overtaken at night by a thief, because you know that a thief is coming. What did Jesus say? If you know that a thief is coming that night, 3 o'clock in the morning, what do? You stay awake. You watch. So Christians, we who are following Jesus, we realize that this is a strong possibility. You're all the children of light and the children of the day. We are not of the night nor of darkness. Therefore, let us not sleep as do others, but let us watch and be sober. How do you watch? And how do you remain sober? There's the question. If you ask me, Pastor Gordon, what's going to happen with Syria, and what's going to happen with Israel, and what's going to happen, all I can tell you, my opinion is that nothing good is going to happen over there. But do I know? I don't know. Does anybody know? Only God knows exactly what's going to happen. Only God knows who's going to attack who. Only God knows how long this thing is going to go on. I know only one thing. I need to be ready. I need to be ready because you know what? Maybe there are some in this building right now who are not going to live to the end of the week. I don't know when my time is coming. I don't know when my life is going to be over. I need to be ready now. So the lesson that I want to teach is that we need to prepare. We need to prepare for this thing mentally. And one of the things I wanted to say here is do not hate any person. If somebody's out there hating President Obama or John McCain or one of those guys, that's a useless exercise and use of your energy. You're just hating another human being, and I already told you, God is in control. As a Christian, we should not hate people. We should pray for them. Our job is to pray for the President of the United States and for the President of Russia and for all of the world leaders. My job, I feel, is to pray for peace. I don't want war. I am against war. By the way, and I can tell you this, I wrote an email to both of my senators and to my congressmen, and I said, look, I'm against the war. I want you to know that as a citizen of the state of Colorado, I'm against the war. And I said, we are all tired of the wars. Why don't you take some of all of that money and spend it on education? Amen. Colorado, they're firing nurses from schools. In Chicago, they closed 70 public schools. There is no money. But there is a money for $1 million missile, $1 million a pop. There is money for that. I'm against it. I'm against wars. I'm against the United States going into all of these wars. I'm for peace. The war that's going to happen in the Armageddon and the Russia and the China and the United States and all of that stuff, when that happens, even then, I believe we should pray for peace, not for war. Amen. I don't understand these Christians out there who are constantly pushing for war. Let's bomb them. Let's bomb them. How do you know who you are bombing? They asked the president, why are you doing this? Because you campaigned on peace. And he said, he used the classical line to answer that. He says, well, if we need to preserve the peace, we are willing to go to war. To me, that's kind of a stupid statement. Now, I like the president, but I think this is the wrong thing for this country. I think this is the wrong thing for the world. I think when God decides that the end has come, He's going to make it happen. But I don't want to be the one to promote the wars. I don't want to be the one to promote the murder. There are some Christians out there who would like nothing better than to start the war in the Middle East so that Jesus would come. Do you realize that every year the state of Israel turns back a whole bunch of evangelical Christians from entering into Israel because they are entering into Israel for the sole purpose of starting trouble? They want to go into Israel and set off a bomb because they believe if they get this war started, then Jesus is going to come. So the government of Israel actually has a whole list of these evangelical Christians who would like to get a war started over there. And when they land in Tel Aviv, they put them back on the plane and send them back to the United States. You can find this on the internet yourself, this story. It's crazy that Christians would want that. Don't hate any person and don't panic. Don't panic because if God is in control of the world events, then He is in control of my safety too. So we have to be prepared mentally. We also have to be prepared physically. Are you staying healthy? Are you taking care of your health? What happens if things do go bad in our country and you can't live in your house anymore? You got to move. What happens in the extreme situation if you have to run away? How are you going to survive if you're not taking care of your body, if you're not staying healthy? How are you going to survive if you don't have any money, if all you carry in your wallet right now is credit cards instead of cash? Let me tell you something. If you carry a bunch of credit cards in your wallet, all you got is a debt. Nothing else. At least I have $15 in my wallet. I can go find something healthy to eat for $15. But if you have a credit card, you have a liability. I'm not saying get rid of everything, but get rid of your debt. Set yourself free. Do you have resources where you can survive for a week or two? You know, this reminds me right now what's happening in Boulder and Lafayette and all of these cities up north. Highways closed between Greeley and Wyoming border, and people are flooded out. We had people who couldn't come to church today because their apartments are flooded out in Boulder. They called me this morning, said, Pastor Ron, we can't come. We can't get through. What happens if you get into a little bit of trouble? Can you survive? Do you even think in those terms? Or do you just assume that King Soopers is always going to be open forever? And you can just go in there and get whatever you want, whenever you want. When I go to the old country sometimes and visit folks over there, they went through 10 years of civil war. And you know what? I go into a house and I visit an old friends that I grew up with. They save everything. They save food. They save old containers. They save old shoes. They save everything. Their houses are packed. I mean, it's like hoarders. And I say, why are you doing this? And you know what they say? They say, you were not here when the war happened. We didn't have anything. Stores were closed. Banks were closed. ATMs were closed. You couldn't get cash anywhere. You couldn't buy food anywhere. Are you ready for even a little bit of trouble? And then the last and the most significant point to me is, are we prepared spiritually? You know, to me, this whole issue of Syria is a warning to me to get myself right with Jesus. That's what it is. It's a warning to each one of us that says, guys, you don't know when this world can be set on fire. You just don't know. We are sitting here now enjoying this wonderful church Sabbath. In a few days, we could be embroiled in the middle of a war that can literally affect us. Do you realize that in Europe, in the old country, they're paying $7 and $8 and $9 a gallon for gas? Just try to think about it. $9 a gallon for gas. Just think about that for a moment. How far could you go on that if you had to pay that for that here? I think it's a reality that can happen here. Are you walking with God every day? Do you train yourself to hear His voice? Do you study God's Word? Do you seek His guidance in your life? Can you honestly tell me, as you sit here today, can you honestly tell me that you have experienced God's power in your life in this last year, 2013? Or has it gone unnoticed by you in this year? Why are we Christians? I don't want to be a Seventh-day Adventist simply because I believe in the Sabbath day and the prophecy. I want to be a Seventh-day Adventist because I want to feel God's power in my life. I want to be able to stand here and tell you, you know, God is working miraculously in my life. And when I look at the things that, you know, I guess this is a testimony time. When I look at the things that God has done in the life of this church, I'm amazed. Jim walked up to me a minute before sermon and he says, Gordon, there is no parking out there. It's all packed. People are parking out on the grass. We got 3, 4, I don't even know how many church services are going on right now here. I forget about the Indonesians. They're over there in the school. Another group is coming here this afternoon. Spanish are coming back in the afternoon. I don't think that this church has ever been as used, the facility has, as it is this year. I don't think it ever has. And God has opened the doors for us to be on television all of those years, and to be on radio now the last month and a half, and to actually witness and minister to people in all areas of life. And God has actually blessed this church. Milos, I don't know how many kids are over there next door. My guess is you had 20 teenagers there for Sabbath school, and the children's church and everything else. So I can see the power of God working on this campus, because I tell you, I'm really not that good of a preacher or a pastor for that matter. I'm okay, but not that good. So definitely not my doing, everything that's happening here. So God does these things in spite of me. And we put together a team of people. There are highly qualified people in our basement right now live streaming. We have lay pastors. I looked the other day on our website, every one of our lay pastors has some kind of a master's degree in theology, and they're a lay pastor here in Arvada Church, working and blessing the people of this community. So I can stand here in front of you and I can tell you without a doubt in my heart or mind that I can see God's power at work in this church. And I want to ask you, do you see power of God working in your personal life? And if you are not, then how do we change that? I want to help you change that. If God is giving all of these wonderful experiences to us as a body, why wouldn't He give them to you as an individual? And you know what? I'm looking across this audience, and I see people here in this audience who should have been dead 5 and 6 years ago, and they're still here because God wanted them to be here. And I see people here in this audience who struggled with the lack of money and the job and were contemplating a suicide. And they're doing better. And God is blessing them. So I see God's power in many of your lives here. But I want to see God's power in every one of your lives out there. God's power should be manifested in the lives of these children that are down there in the basement, of these teenagers. This is not about just learning about Syria and the prophecy, and it's not about it. To me, that's just a warning that says, hey guys, wake up, because I could come back really soon. You're going to be ready. You're going to recognize me. Are you going to know my voice? And I want these young people to experience the power of God in their life, go to college, and accomplish great things with their lives. But we all need to work for that together. Dennis, you said this morning we should have some of our kids up at Vista Ridge. Why not? I want to see that. We had to close our school here. How long ago was that, Jim? I don't remember anymore. It's been 10 years. Because we just couldn't handle it financially. And we got more kids than I bet any other church out there, in the Adventist system at least. And they're here. They don't have the money to go to a 7-day Adventist church. Their parents are working hard. How do we make it happen? Milos, I'm going to ask you a question. Let's see if you know the answer off of the top of your head. You passed out a slip last week, and you asked people to volunteer their time. How many slips did you get back? About? Ballpark figure. 15, 20. And when you added all of the hours together, how many volunteer hours do you think you had there per month or per week? You didn't add them all? I should have asked Jasmina. She knows. About. Give me an about. 60 or 70 hours. See, she knew. I knew she was going to know. Because that's why you married her, yeah. She's a math person. She calculates everything, I tell you. But he passed out the slip and said, would you like to volunteer in this church? And about 15 of you said, yes, I would. And when she added all of those hours together, we're looking at 60 or 70 hours. I don't know is it per week or per month? Per week, my goodness. So the church has that resource at our disposal to use those folks to help out to the church. You know what? Maybe you don't have time to give to the church. Maybe you can give an extra $5 every month to one of the ministries that you want to support. Maybe you can volunteer to teach in one of the children's classes downstairs. Or maybe you can volunteer to start a small group at your house. Or maybe to start a Sabbath school class next door here in the gym. You can do something for the Lord. Not because God needs my time or because God needs my money, but because I need to see His power manifested in my life. That's why. That's why I'm asking you to help out to the church. You know what? Churches go on, I tell you. People come and people go and churches go on. Pastors come and pastors go and churches will survive. And long after I'm gone, this church is going to go on with another pastor and another membership. You know what I mean? That's not the issue. The issue is, are we making ourselves available to God so that we can feel His power working in our lives? And to me, that's the key to everything. Jesus is going to come. Whether it happens right now, whether we have a major blow up in Syria right now or not, that's not the issue. Whether we have the Armageddon or not, that's not the issue. The issue is we got to be ready. Next week, I want to continue studying about Syria, and we are going to talk directly from the Bible. We are going to explain the typical historical Seventh-day Adventist position on Armageddon and on these very last days in the human history. And we're going to talk about it and see if we are ready for those kinds of events to take place in our lifetime. I hope that this message, not challenging, but encouraging you to reevaluate your commitment to God. And to remember that your commitment to God is so that you could experience Him in your life. God bless you. And Milos, I know you have more of those slips that people can sign up for if they want to, right? They should be in the lobby. Okay, if you want to fill out one of those slips, see Jasmine. She is in the back booth. Folks, thank you for being so patient with my long sermon, and God bless you. Amen.